Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. This is part 3 of Build Your Own ChatGPT front end. So we did most of the basic logic of what we want to do prior to starting the front end, the Angular part, in the last 2 lessons. But there's a couple of additions we need to make to what we ended up with in part 2 in order to make it compatible with a front end like Angular or React or Vue. And that just has to do with how Fast API is handling the API requests from the outside world. And when we want to deploy it, what we need to put in there to make sure it works in a server type environment. Because right now we're running it off of our desktop, and eventually this is going to be the middleware for our server. So let me get into GitHub. And so if you go to our GitHub, if you go to the Kinetic C's ChatGPT API Part 3 repository, you're going to have what it is we're going to be working on today. Now, the first changes that we need to make are to main.py. Now, the important part here, and I'm just going to look at it in the repository so that you see. We're adding something called API router that is only going to get used when it gets deployed to a server. And we've also got this thing called Starlet Middleware WSGI that we're also going to uncomment when we deploy it to production. But for the most part, the important parts here have to do with being able to handle these middleware requests without getting a CORS middleware error. Now, if you've written APIs in PHP using Angular, you've seen that error, and there's a workaround for that. Well, you get that same error when you use Fast API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to copy these first 3 lines and go over to my PyCharm, and I'm just going to replace these first 3 lines. Okay, so it actually says here from ChatGPT, import. Interesting. It says from ChatGPT, import OpenAI, and I'm getting an error message. So I'm just trying to figure out what that's all about. Oh, because I copied it into the wrong place. Break out of that. I needed to be in main.py. Okay, so now I'm copying this over. All right, so what we've now done is we are importing Fast API middleware cores, and we need that. Now, that's already part of Fast API, so it's already there. But let me do this. I'm going to run the project, and then let me get a terminal opened up. Okay, so we've imported what we need to import, but the next thing we need to do is we need to specify the origins for where calls are going to come from. So what happens is when you're running an API or you're running an API and you're accessing it with a tool like Angular, it's going to have an origin, and the origin is the place where the user got the code from. So even though it's JavaScript libraries that run on the desktop, it has a referrer, and that's the origin. So let me go back to our repository, and you see I need to create this array. This array that I have between lines 16 and 19, those are the locations where you're allowed to access this API from. So I'm going to go back to PyCharm, and I'm going to put this here. So now what we've done is we've said that we can access this API from localhost 4200, and we can access it from kineticseas.com. So then the next thing I want to do is run this add middleware statement, where what we're doing is we are telling the application, we are telling Fast API that it's going to allow all origins, it's going to allow credentials, and it's going to allow get, posts, put, delete, etc. And then it is also going to allow all the headers. Then below it here, we also have this router equals API router, where in line 32, this commented line, we're basically telling the program that it's getting accessed from a subdirectory of our Apache web server. So I'll cover that in another video. I just want to get this code in here because this is going to be some code that we're going to carry along with us for everything else that we do related to this project. So let me go back to PyCharm and the origins. Okay, so now we have the application the way we need to have it for what we're doing here. So when we run this application, it is going to allow us to have alternate applications that are not browsers if they're coming from localhost 4200 or they're coming from Kinetic Cs. And it's going to allow all HTTP methods and all headers. So that's what we need in order for this to work with Angular. Now the other change I want to make is I want to make a change to this ChatGPT.py. I hate having SQL code inside like this. So what I'm going to do down at the bottom is I'm going to create a static method. And I don't remember what I called it. I think I called it save chat. And it's going to have role as a string and prompt as a string. And then what it's going to do is it's just going to do these lines here, the post and the SQL data post. Okay, so what we're going to do when you call save chat with the string and with the role in the prompt, it's going to put the prompt, we're going to call it content. So now what we do is we create this post dictionary object, and then we call the SQL data post. And so that's just our save chat. So in the two places that we have that, I'm going to say my OpenAI save chat. And then in this case, our two variables are role, which comes from completion choices 0 message role, and then content, which comes from completion choices message content. And I'm just doing this to make it easier to read because the idea of having all of these SQL statements in the middle of my code, if you're not a SQL person, it actually gets confusing. So I'm going to do the same thing that we do up here. I'm going to replace these two lines with it. So I'm going to say my OpenAI, save chat, and in this case we're just going to put in the text string user and the prompt. And so I'll remove these other lines. Okay, so now all we've done is we've just refactored this a little bit. So we have a function called save chat that saves it. It saves the prompt chat that we enter, and then when we get our results, it saves the results that we get back. So that's just a simple change I wanted to make there. Then I think I actually have one more change where I didn't like the name of clear, and I call it clear chat. And then when I go back to main, it needs to be clear chat here, or down here. Okay, so this is just a little simple refactoring that we needed to do in order to have this work with Angular. So the next series of videos is going to be in a different playlist. It is going to be the Angular part of this. Now I'm assuming you're either new to Angular or you're kind of a beginner. So if you're not, you're probably going to want to fast forward through a lot. But if you are, then I think I'm going to go through this at the perfect pace for you to get used to writing Angular applications as a front end to ChatGPT. So I'll see you in that series.